In a valley cradled by hills the color of faded moss, there lived a man named Elias. He was not a man of great importance in the grand scheme of kingdoms and empires, but in his own quiet world, he was an artist of the highest order. Elias was a cartographer, but he did not map coastlines or trade routes. He mapped moments of stillness. His life's work was a single, sprawling parchment known as the Great Map, which he kept rolled in a long, cedar-lined tube in his small, stone cottage. On it, he did not draw mountains and rivers as others did. Instead, he recorded places where one could feel the turning of the world slow to a gentle halt. He would mark a spot, for instance, by the bend of a river where the afternoon sun, for exactly 12 minutes in late autumn, would strike the water in a way that made the ripples look like molten gold. He would use inks made from ground lapis lazuli to denote the quality of the silence, and a pigment crushed from dried marigolds to show the warmth of the air. His cottage was itself a location on the map. It sat beside the whispering reeds, a vast marsh where the wind never blew harshly but instead wove through the hollow stalks, creating a constant, soft symphony that was less a sound and more a feeling of deep, resonant peace. For years, Elias had been content to map the valley and its surrounding hills. He had charted the hollow log where a fox family slept through the winter, the flat stone warmed by a geothermal spring that was perfect for stargazing, and the precise spot in the bluebell wood where the scent of the flowers was at its most pure. But recently, a new ambition, a gentle but persistent calling, had settled in his heart. He had heard tales from the few travelers who passed through his valley, whispers of a place far to the east, a path known only in legend as the Sunken Road. It was said to be a road not built by hands, but worn into the world by the slow, patient passage of time itself, and that to walk it was to feel the memory of the earth. He knew, with a certainty that hummed in his bones, that he must map it. The Sunken Road would be the centerpiece of his great map of stillness. The decision, once made, settled over him not like a heavy burden, but like a soft blanket. The journey would be long, perhaps lasting many seasons, and his preparations were slow, deliberate, and imbued with a sense of quiet ceremony. He spent a week doing nothing but preparing his inks. He ventured into the crystal creek to find the smoothest, most vibrantly colored stones. He ground a deep ochre from a stone found only at sunrise, a soft gray from river slate, and a verdant green from a moss that grew on the north side of ancient oaks. He simmered berries and bark and flower petals in small copper pots over his hearth, straining the colorful liquids through fine linen into small, sealed glass vials. Each color held a memory of the valley, a farewell gift from his home. His tools were next. He selected 10 rolls of the finest vellum, creamy and smooth, smelling faintly of goat's milk and sunshine. He sharpened his quills, each one from a different bird, the steady raven for bold lines, the delicate finch for fine details, the silent owl for shading in the twilight hours. His compass was a peculiar thing. It did not point north. It was a disc of polished silver with a single, free-floating needle of magnetized ironwood. The needle did not align with the planet's magnetic field, but was said to point towards the nearest source of profound tranquility. He packed his satchel with care. Alongside the tools of his trade, he placed hard biscuits, dried fruit, a block of sharp cheese wrapped in wax paper, and a small bag of mint leaves for tea. He packed a single change of clothes, a whetstone, a flint and steel, and a thick, woolen blanket that had been his grandfather's. On the final morning, as the first light of dawn turned the mist over the whispering reeds into a sea of silver and rose, Elias stood at his door. He took one last look at his small cottage, the curl of smoke from the dying embers in the hearth, the familiar pattern of lichen on the stone walls. He felt no sadness, only a quiet gratitude. He adjusted the satchel on his shoulder, held his compass in his palm, and took his first step away from home. The reeds whispered their farewell, and the journey began. The compass needle quivered, then settled, pointing not towards the well-worn trader's path that skirted the valley, but directly into the heart of the Aethelwood, the oldest forest in the region. Elias followed without hesitation. The moment he stepped under the boughs of the first great tree, the world changed. The air grew cooler, filled with the rich, loamy scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and 1,000 years of slow, silent growth. The light, which had been bright and clear in the valley, was now dappled and green, filtered through a ceiling of leaves so dense it was like being underwater. The sounds of the open world faded, replaced by the hushed reverence of the forest. The whisper of the reeds was gone, and in its place was a silence that was not empty, but full. It was full of the infinitesimal sounds of life, the tiny scuttling of a beetle over a root, the soft unfurling of a fern frond, the slow, imperceptible groan of wood as the ancient trees settled into the earth. He walked for hours, his boots making almost no sound on the thick carpet of moss that covered the forest floor. The trees here were giants. Their trunks were wider than his cottage, their bark gnarled and fissured like the faces of old men, and their highest branches were lost to sight, hidden in the green twilight far above. He saw no large animals, but he felt the presence of life everywhere. He noticed the delicate, almost invisible webs of spiders strung between ferns, shimmering with dew. He saw fungi of impossible color and shape sprouting from fallen logs, some like cascading orange shelves, others like delicate, violet trumpets. He walked until the green light began to fade into a deep, velvety blue. He chose his resting spot in a small clearing where a single, thick shaft of moonlight pierced the canopy, illuminating a perfect circle of ground. He unrolled his woolen blanket, ate a simple meal of bread and cheese, and lay down with his head on his satchel, watching the single beam of light as if it were his own private moon. The forest breathed around him, a slow, deep, sleeping breath, and Elias felt his own breathing slow to match it. He made his first entry for the new journey in his journal, not with ink, but with words in his mind, the Aethelwood. The silence here is green. It tastes of moss and thyme. After 3 days of walking through the deep woods, the terrain began to change. The ground sloped gently downwards, and a new sound began to weave itself into the forest silence, the distant, musical murmur of moving water. Elias followed the sound, and soon the trees thinned, opening onto the banks of a river he had never seen before. It was not a wide or powerful river, but one of exceptional clarity. The water ran so clear over a bed of smooth, colorful stones that it seemed the stones themselves were vibrating with light. He knelt at the bank and dipped his hand in. The water was cool and carried a faint, clean scent of minerals. As he held his hand there, he noticed a peculiar phenomenon. The stones on the riverbed, worn smooth by eons of flowing water, were not silent. As the current flowed over them, they produced a soft, continuous, chiming hum. Each stone seemed to have its own note, and together they created a complex, ever-changing harmony. It was a gentle, hypnotic sound, a song sung by the patient heart of the earth. He decided to make his camp here for a few days. This place was a treasure, a symphony of stillness that deserved to be chronicled. He spent the first day simply listening, walking the banks and noting how the river's song changed with its depth and speed. In the shallow rapids, the sound was light and tinkling, like thousands of tiny bells. In the deeper, slower pools, the hum was a low, resonant drone, almost a purr. On the second day, he began to map it. He did not draw the river's course, but its music. He waded into the cool water, his trousers rolled to his knees, and sat on a large, flat boulder in the middle of the current. He closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. He used a soft charcoal pencil to sketch the flow of the music on his vellum, using swirling patterns for the high notes and thick, straight lines for the low drones. He devised new symbols to represent the way the sound felt on his skin and the way the light refracted through the water to dapple the singing stones below. He crushed a bit of the gray river slate and mixed it with water to create a pigment that perfectly captured the river's silvery, translucent quality. For 3 days, he worked, ate, and slept by the river of whispering stones, and when he finally packed his things to continue his journey east, the gentle chiming of the water was etched into his memory, a permanent part of his own inner silence. Leaving the river, Elias's path, guided by his compass, began to climb. The Aethelwood gave way to sparser forests of pine and birch, and soon,